Hi everyone, today we'll see about the writing task 1. So in this pie chart, we are going to see about the pie chart. So here the sample is given. So the question is, the pie chart below show the average household expenditures in Japan and Malaysia in the year 2010. Okay, so I organized the Japan and Malaysia expenses and we are going to see the answer for this. Okay, so this is the answer and this is the pie chart. So the pattern should be same. 20 minutes is the allotted time and we have to write the words between 150 to 180. It should not be lesser than 150 and it should not exceed 180. So this is the pattern. So we are going to frame. So before narrating the answer, we should have an idea. Okay, so Japan and Malaysia, what are the expenses, what will be the more expenses, what will be the lesser expenses, because we are going to explain in the conclusion part, that is in the overall statement. Okay, that's it. So I'm paraphrasing the first question. Okay, to start the introduction part, the two pie charts show the proportion of money spent on various household necessities in Malaysia and Japan in 2020. Okay, so I mentioned the question. Okay, so I paraphrase and followed by that the date is calibrated in percentage. So next scenario is we have to give the conclusion part, overall statement. So the overall, I'm starting the word overall. The data indicate that in both cases of the food, housing and other goods services were the main expenses, while the both countries spend the least on healthcare. So I said earlier, we have to focus on how much they are spending more. So in which aspect they are spending more, we have to point it out, and in which they are focusing least aspect, we have to point it out, so that we can organize it in the conclusion. Okay, this is the pattern. And their main expenses, while both countries spend the least on healthcare. Okay, so main expenses, and both cases food, housing and other good services were the main expenses. So main expenses for both the countries is food, housing and other good services, while the least for healthcare. So this is the conclusion part. Okay, coming to the paragraphs, it can be clearly seen, I am starting with this word, it can be clearly seen from the chart that in Malaysia is the greatest proportion of expenditure, that is 34%. You can see here 34% for housing. Okay, the second place is for food 27, and followed by good services 20, and then transport 10% and healthcare 3%. Whereas in Japan, the major proportion for the expenditure is good services, and then followed by for food 24%, and then housing 21%, followed by transport 20, and least is healthcare. So both the aspects 6 and 3, healthcare will be the least, but the main expenses will be on food, housing and other good services. Okay, so I'm starting with the word paragraph. It can be clearly seen from the chart that in Malaysia the greatest proportion of expenditure is 34%. Was on the housing, while in Japan housing accounted for just how much they are spending, 21%. Okay, so 21% of the total, followed by in Japan the greatest single expenses was good services, that is 29% was good services at 29%, and compared with, so for the Malaysia, how much they are spending is for good services 20%. So 20% in Malaysia. Moreover, 26% in Malaysia. Moreover, food came in the second place in Japan at, so with this 26, so it is 20. This 20. Okay, so 20% in Malaysia. And moreover, starting with the second paragraph, moreover, food came in the second place in Japan and 24% while in Malaysia. Okay, so food is the second place in Japan. First is good services and followed by food, and then third place is housing. Whereas here in Malaysia, first place is housing and then followed by food and then good services. Okay, so while in Malaysia the actual proportion was higher, 27%. In Japan, another major expenses was transport. At how much percentage? 20%, but this was much lower. So these are the keywords we have to focus. In this ratio percentage, we have to focus proportion, greatest proportion, lesser proportion, accounted. These are the words you can use it for pie charts. Okay, so another major expenses was transport at 20%, but this was much lower in Malaysia. That is, we have to mention the part, that is 10%. And surprisingly, in both the countries, the smallest percentage of expenditure was on healthcare. That is the least. So total words I have written here is 153. So this is the sample pattern. Okay, so you can follow this method. And the main formula is we have to start the introduction and followed by overall statement and 2 body paragraphs. And keywords is very important. Grammar mistakes should not be there. And timing, we have to maintain time management is important, and words should not be lesser than 150 or it should not greater than 180. This is the pattern. Thank you.